السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على خير المرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. The front page newspaper of the Herald, the British Herald newspaper, on December 12, 1917, had the following headline: Jerusalem is rescued by the British after 673 years of Muslim rule. So this was the front page of the Herald. Jerusalem is rescued by British after 673 years of Muslim rule. Now, the 673 years, one has to be understood in relation to the end of the Crusades and the Muslims bringing to an end the Crusades. So the British were looking from a historical lens. Actually, in reality, during the First World War, the Prime Minister was asking for the British forces and Allenby to conclude the campaign and to present Jerusalem as a Christmas gift to the British people and to the Christian world. And much of the discourse during that time was speaking in a language that using the Crusades, so much so that the Foreign Office wrote an instruction to the journalist not to use this language, because among the British troops were many Muslim soldiers that were recruited from the British colonial possessions. If you remember, during the period of the First World War, the British had an empire that extended from one side of the earth to the other, that it was said that the sun never set on the British Empire, because from one side of the earth to the other. And now we say that the British no longer have any sun, and basically they go to Greece to get some suntan in order to get some suntan relative to their country. And post-Brexit, most likely they're going to shrink a little more. If you think that God doesn't have a good sense of humor, you could look at the British Empire and actually say that there is a God, and therefore you might be mighty today, but tomorrow is a different day altogether. Now, I'm saying this in order for us to ground ourselves. Palestine did not, as a cause, did not begin with Trump yesterday. We've been struggling on Palestine for the past 100 years, and this is the 100th year anniversary of the Balfour Declaration. And even before the issuing of the Balfour Declaration, there were almost another 30 to 40 years of political machination to try to engage in securing Palestine as part of the British/Zionist colonial enterprise, and to help dismantle the Ottoman state. So the dismantling of the Ottoman went hand in hand with the British designs over Palestine. Now, to add another dimension of this, the collapse and bringing an end to the Ottoman state resulted in the creation of what we call today the modern Middle East. I always insist I don't know where the Middle East is, because right now we're in the Midwest, so when you tell me I'm in California, where is the Middle East in relations to where I am at, you have a different perspective. But the construction of the Middle East is a modern 20th century construction to delineate a territory that is colonially crafted post-World War I by the British, French, as well as inherited by the Americans. So the concept of the Middle East itself is a colonial concept. And as a result of World War I, we get the crafting of the current period and the current geography that we are all familiar with. That geography is connected to what is called the Great Arab Revolt. And for us to be very accurate, The Great Arab Revolt was not great, nor was it Arab. It was a British intelligence operation run by Ting Downing Street by someone called T.E. Lawrence, and it's insulting to call him Lawrence of Arabia because it's a high honor to be affiliated with the Arabs. The Prophet is Arab, the Quran is Arabic, and the language of paradise is Arabic. And therefore, to say Lawrence of Arabia, give him a dignity that he have none. It was an operation that was run from the British Intelligence Office in Cairo to create a division between the Arab part of the Muslim world and the Ottoman state. And the promise was given by the British in writing that Sharif Hussein will be declared as a caliph, because language that was used by the British that the Ottomans were the illegitimate rulers of the Muslim world. Now, I need to tell you, the British have no standing in Ahl al-Hal wal-Aqd to determine who is a legitimate or illegitimate, but it seems that we continue to replicate this aspect of seeking legitimation for external forces to tell us who would be the legitimate ruler or not. So this is an important to ground ourselves in relations to Palestine. So it's a 100-year struggle. It is the last colonial project to be adopted by the great powers. And that's why often the contradiction of states that proclaim self-determination, that proclaim peace, proclaim human rights, look the other way and continue to incubate and support Israel's violation and Zionist violation of the rights of Palestinians, because that's their child. Israel was incubated within a Western settler colonial structure, and they continue to see it as a success narrative for themselves by creating this state in relations to Zionism and the end of World War I. The second part of my argument, one, is again, this is a 100-year project. The second part is the legal structure that governs Jerusalem today itself is a colonially constructed legal structure. We often reference to Resolution 181 in terms of what is the legal status of Jerusalem. Resolution 181 created two states, the Jewish state / Zionist state, and an Arab state, and then created Jerusalem as a separate territory to be governed with an international regime to be implemented or developed under the auspices of the United Nations. Now, from a legal perspective, Resolution 181 was a great travesty on the Palestinians, because it removed the Palestinians' right to their own land. It also granted the Zionist movement 56% of a territory. At the time, they owned 6% of the land, yet they were granted 56%. Palestinians who owned the overwhelming majority of the land were granted 43%, and the rest was Jerusalem, Resolution 181. It is that resolution that sets the stage for the Nakba and the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians in 1947-48. Now, we're in December right now, which actually the beginning of the ethnic cleansing of Palestine did not begin with Deir Yassin. It actually began in December, where some of the massacres that were directed at the Palestinians began in December. It culminated with over 100 massacres that were directed at the Palestinians to cause the expulsion and the flight of 750,000 Palestinians. And as a consequence of the expulsion, the UN passed Resolution 194. Resolution 194. Israel's admission to the United Nations as a member was contingent on its implementation of Resolution 194. Resolution 194 for the Palestinians constitute what we call the right of return. Now, I know some in the PA, or whatever it's called, they are open to negotiating the right of return. And this is basically negotiators that possibly don't know the negotiation from their head to their toe. And there are also what's called the multilateral negotiations relative to the refugees, including some Western countries, who they're actually participating to ease the pressure on Israel by trying to facilitate taking some Palestinians, including our neighbor to the north, Canada, which is part to the multilateral negotiations on the refugees, and part of the solution is that we will take some Palestinians to Canada, as if Palestinian struggle was about locating a good skiing place or to entertain ourselves for a snow season, because we don't have as many snow seasons in the Arab world. This is basically somebody that is, quote, attempting to help you by actually removing your rights as part of the process of helping you. So the multilateral track for the refugee has been a travesty, because many of those who are participating in the multilateral track are participating with the direction of easing the pressure on Israel, and some of those who are on the Palestinian negotiating team are using the same language. This is basically individuals that are representing you or have been appointed to represent you, while fundamentally not actually holding the principle that is recognized by an international legal structure that itself is vested in a colonial epistemic relative to how Palestine is governed and looked upon. So 194 is an important element, and therefore collectively Palestinians have the right of return. The third element, Jerusalem is also regulated by a set of resolutions post-1967, Resolution 242338, and then in 1980 you had a number of resolutions, Resolution 476 and 478. Israel actually have pulled this stunt, which is Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. They actually annexed Jerusalem in 1980. And at that time, the United States actually voted in the Security Council to actually call the Israeli annexation to be null and void and contrary to the standards of international law and the Fourth Geneva Convention. So Trump's unilateral decision to move the embassy does not shift even the problematic set of international law that governs Jerusalem. Now, the reason that Trump has undertaken this step is very important. The reason that, and I think Osama have mentioned some of it relative to the domestic pressure, but make no mistake about it, that Trump and some of the political elites in the United States would not have dared to take this step unless there is already among the Arab and Muslim world individuals and elites that are also using their own political interests in pushing and accepting this framework. And I think everyone is aware that the Arab and Muslim world have shifted its emphasis of thinking that the strategic existential threat for the Arab world is Iran rather than Israel. That has been a titanic shift in the region, so much so that countries have already moved to think of Israel as a strategic ally rather than a strategic liability. Now, domestically in the United States, we have been asserting since the end of the Cold War that Israel is a strategic liability to the United States, let alone being a strategic threat to the Arab world, which she is. But that alignment in there uses the language, in order for us to mobilize the Arab world for a war against Iran, we have to remove the Palestinian struggle from the cards of mobilization for the Arab and Muslim street, because it has, as a single factor, an element of unification that rallies the landscape of the Arab and Muslim world to oppose and disrupt that approach. And therefore, it's not surprising that some of the Arab elites have been encouraging and moving in that direction including possibly trying to address or bring about a reconciliation among the Palestinian body politic, not for the interest of the Palestinians, but actually as a way to dispense with the Palestinians as an important strategic factor in the region. Now let me remind you, in the 1980s, 1987 in particular, there was an Arab summit. That Arab summit said that Palestine is not the strategic and critical cause for the Arab world, and highlighted that Iran was the critical threat that faces the Arab world. It is after that Arab summit that the first uprising actually erupted, because it was a realignment in the Arab world. And I think we're experiencing today a similar realignment that is occurring. And it is very important for us here domestically to understand this realignment in order for us domestically to be engaged in the political landscape in this country. Meaning that there is an urging and a pushing for another war in the region, which we have already had. If you don't remember the Iran-Iraq war, that have cost the region almost $300 to $400 billion, that set the stage for the invasion of Kuwait, that set the stage for the US deployment of forces in the region. So we've been through that again, so you don't need to reenact the same type of illogical approach relative to the policies. So there is a tremendous responsibility on us in here to not only speak to ourselves and to educate ourselves, but also to speak to the larger American public and to say to them that this reorientation of, again, trying to stoke a conflict in the region, a bloodied region, is not in the best interest of our own society in here, as well as the broader world, whether it's in the Arab and Muslim world or the world in general. That war should not be the primary factor or the primary urgency by which we engage in policy. And this is again what Trump being asked and worked upon by some of the Arab elites that think that this is the strategy to pursue, and I think we need to put a stop to it. And the sooner we do this, the better it is again for Palestine. Lastly, I think it's important for us to continue to emphasize that Jerusalem is the capital of Palestine under occupation. So every time you speak, that's how you speak. Jerusalem is the capital of Palestine under occupation. The fact that Trump or Israel or AIPAC uses that language does not change that the majority of the world recognize Palestine. More countries recognize Palestinian self-determination just in the last vote of 176, and you need to act as representing the majority of the world, not actually representing the Zionists speak or AIPAC speak. When you speak AIPAC, you're helping the framing that they're coming with. What you need is to constantly frame your own reality and then act upon it to change it relative to the political landscape in this country. Palestine is free. It's a state of mind. It will be actualized, and inshallah, all of us, we will be in Palestine at one day, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.